Hello and welcome to 3 Minute Gaming. I'm Nathan, and today I'm going to tell you if this game's worth your time and bandwidth. Today's game is Layers of Fear, the re-release. Bloober team is back with a semi-remake slash remaster of their first two Layers of Fear games and some bonus stuff in this new release. Is this collection worth playing? Let's find out. Layers of Fear is Bloober team releasing a game with the exact same name as a game they released 7 years ago, because this trend of remaking games with the same name isn't confusing enough already. What this actually is a collection of the first two Layers of Fear game and all their DLC, with a short additional story connecting them all together and remastered in a new engine. Since this is essentially 3 games in one, I'm going to approach them as such, starting with the new content that ties it together titled The Writer. A woman in the 1950s is sent to a spooky lighthouse to try and gain inspiration to write a new best-selling novel. Therein, she finds a sort of muse demon, a creature that offers her the ability to write well in exchange for some unmentioned payment. This ties into the other two stories, as we'll soon see, and is a retcon of those two games, attempting to connect their stories about creatives succumbing to Faustian bargains. This story is probably the most interesting, as the character is the most likable, and her small pieces that interconnect are fun, even if her area is too small. The original Layers of Fear is a remake of that first game, except this time a lot of the more obnoxious puzzle portions have been trimmed down. For those unfamiliar, this is a walking simulator that apes more than a little from PT, Amnesia, and Silent Hill 2, about an abusive painter father who goes insane attempting to create his masterpiece. The game has the typical Bloober blunt force trauma approach to storytelling, being completely unsubtle in every way, with most of the actual gameplay being walking around. There is a new mechanic in that a ghost will attempt to kill you, but basically you just blast her with a light to incapacitate her and move on with your life. This also has 2 pieces of DLC, one of which is new, and both have strong visual design and attempt to explain what happened in a game that they already very clearly explained what happened, but hey, they exist. Layers of Fear 2 is set on a cruise ship with a struggling actor and involves you playing film reels to relive actual famous thrillers or horror movies like The Shining, Seven, and so on. The concept is great, but the game ends up being more frustrating than the first, as it's generally more obtuse and frankly tedious as you switch between various realms to solve puzzles and try to escape the ship or something. I don't have nearly as much to say about this one because I think it's not nearly as interesting. Gameplay across all of these experiences is basically typical walking simulator fare with some very light puzzles, but the general idea being forward moving towards exploration. Bloober loves the turnaround and the environment change gimmick from Antichamber, so expect to see lots of that here, as well as a fair number of imaginative and visually creative concepts. And I don't really have much more to say about this, honestly. I imagine this is Bloober's attempt to create a definitive edition of these two games, as well as inviting some sort of connection between all 3 stories to make the whole vision feel unified. So what did I like about Layers of Fear? Well, Bloober team's visual style continues to excel, and while I honestly think the original games still hold up visually, their imaginative worlds and set pieces are fantastic, particularly in Layers of Fear 1 and its paint motif. Additionally, a lot of the puzzles have been adjusted or improved across the games in a way I generally appreciate, with the ending of Layers of Fear 1 in particular being much improved over the find the random checkers puzzle. And lastly, as mentioned, I liked the writer's story and the attempt to interweave all 3 games together somehow in a Faustian bargain. When it comes to the bad, I cannot stress enough how frustratingly blunt Bloober team's storytelling is. I don't mind stories being clear, but most stories, particularly horror ones, don't need such bludgeoning explanations constantly telling you exactly what is happening and why and what it means. It reminds me of this Garth Marenghi quote.
I know writers who use subtext and they're all cowards.
Additionally, these games aren't even remotely scary, which would be fine if the story was engaging, but I found this game to exude some of the worst aspects of the genre, with exploration feeling tedious and dull, and without anything interesting really spicing up the journey. And lastly, Layers of Fear 2 is still just a slog. Despite having some really interesting visual ideas, it's boring, the puzzles aren't interesting, and it really kills the pace. As you know, I rate games here on a 3-point scale: must play, maybe consider, and don't bother. And unless you really enjoy Bloober team's other offerings, I don't think you need to play this Layers of Fear remake. And let me just be clear about something. I actually really like walking simulators, because a lot of times that allows creators to be extremely creative when it comes to their visuals and storytelling. Unfortunately, the Layers of Fear games were already not great, and adding a new coat of paint and only slightly improving them was not enough to pull them out of mediocrity. And that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching. What do you think of Layers of Fear? Be it this one, the original games, or Bloober team in general, please let me know in the comments. But regardless, go out there and maybe avoid Layers of Fear.